How often do you have an idea, then months or years later saw a product or service that resembled your idea and told yourself, I wish I had done something with it? As they say, ideas are a dime a dozen. Those who can take them from validation to a product or service into the marketplace are the movers and shakers who reap the rewards. Stay tuned for some great stories and practical advice on how you can bring your ideas to life. In this episode, we're joined by Jennifer Cain. She spent over 25 years in the healthcare industry, holding several executive leadership positions at various pharmaceuticals, a diplomat for the World Health Organization, and an improv comedian. Yeah, we'll get into that one. And she's also a TEDx speaker, and now a co-founder and CEO of VivaValet, an age-tech startup that is committed to helping olders live at home independently. Welcome, Jennifer.
Welcome.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Artin. Thanks for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, we are so happy to have you here from Basel, Switzerland. You know, I'm a fan. I mean, your background is so fascinating, especially the improv part just thrown in there. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
So, again, thanks, guys, for inviting me. I think when you look at my background and I speak about it, it's the evidence of a curious person who just kept chasing curiosities and chasing purpose. So, you know, I was that probably annoying young kid that you sat next to in fifth grade. You said, I want world peace. You know, I probably was that kid, that girl that sat next to you. It was me that did that because I really, you know, I founded the Model United Nations League in my high school, those kinds of things. You know, I really felt compelled to make a difference in this world and very much around patients, around effective healthcare systems and those kinds of things. And so I really look at the way that I live my life, have lived my life, is that's been the constant North Star. And I picked up things along the way that helped me as tools to deliver that mission. Much more than, I think I'll dabble in this career and that career. It was always all of these elements driving me towards making that bigger purpose.
Sounds pretty amazing. So I have to ask, though, even if you were that kid, maybe yes at times. No, I actually liked that kid in school. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
We might have dated. We really might.
Yeah, exactly.
It would have been your prom date.
That's true. So true.
I would have made you prom king, however, but that.
Yeah. See, that's what I lacked. So obviously. So I am curious to ask a little bit about the improv. Where does that come in? And by the way, that's the part that might have made it so it was more difficult for us to dance because I was that guy who was like, you know, improv, I don't know. So anyway, how'd you get into that?
So improv for me came very late in life, actually, and that's I think one of the big surprises. And when you think about the different arcs and the different kind of acts of your life that. You know, you've got your act 1, your act 2, and I would say even I'm currently in act 3, entering act 4. And in act 3 is where I was bitten by the improv bug. And how that happened was I was at the time living in Brussels, Belgium, and I was in a local theater company, just, you know, having some fun in a musical theater production, which was great. And then I was introduced to an improv class. And it was literally as if something just stuck its teeth into me. And I was addicted to it instantly. And so why was that? Is that I don't think I'd ever felt more present in my entire life. It was through the act of creating with others something from nothing, yes-anding everything, that we became so close. Like anyone I was doing improv with, that connection immediately, that presence. And you know, we think about, you know, Stephen Kotler and being in the zone and these kinds of how do you get in the zone? How do you get into flow? For me, that is my fast track always to get into the zone. And so I realized that it was fun as a tool, as something to play with. And I also realized as I did it around work that I actually was able to increase cohesiveness in teams, creativity in teams, unlock something, maybe some vulnerability, block away the no's and actually get into the yes and thinking that created some pretty interesting innovations along the way. Like we made new business models in one company that I was working in that help patients get access to products probably 3 years before they ever would have had access before, based on using the tools of improv. So I was really convinced quite early about it. It was now 12 years ago that I started. So it was really quite incredible. And, you talk to a lot of people who during COVID had this experience of picking up a new hobby, for example, like knitting or bread making or whatever people did. Everyone had something that they did, even if it was just eating, drinking, right?
Sure.
Right? So for me, I saw the opportunity when COVID happened that all of a sudden everything was flipped online. And my big life dream was to study at Second City. And I, at the time, was asked to do this TED Talk, and I was doing the TED Talk on leadership in a time of COVID and how the improv was a skill that you could use actually in Zooms to actually make people feel more connected to each other in a period where we felt very isolated from each other. It was still a way to build community. And I actually said, that's it. So if everything else is online, if all of the Ivy Leagues all of a sudden opened up their catalogs and people could study whatever they wanted to as open source, I said, I'm going to do improv. And so I did the whole thing. I went through the improv program. I auditioned for conservatory, and I was able to do it while sitting in Switzerland. And for me, it then became this tool of survival. It wasn't only a tool of entertainment. It was a tool of leadership. It was a tool of getting through. I think it engaged my kids to make them feel more at ease in their life. And I think for me, the most important thing is improv always gives, it never takes. And even in people that I've been teaching, now that I've built this theater community and the improv community here in Basel, Switzerland, I've had so many people come to me who've really had hard times, but they come and they come through the improv program, and they come through in the transformation, because also to do improv is to transform, right? So I witnessed this over and over again, time and time again, with myself and also with others who have had really difficult last few years, and some past and some current moments as well. And the improv as a tool has helped all of us get through it.
You mentioned something I want to double click into, and then we want to talk more about VivaValet, but that concept of yes and. I've done some exercises like that with my team in the past, which I found really valuable, but obviously you're more of an expert around it, and you mentioned it a few times, and you talked about how improv can be transformational, in the workplace, with teams, with family. Could you describe a little bit more of how the yes and sort of thought process mentality works?
Absolutely. So in the world of improv, it is the first rule. So you think about improv, it's comedy, it's loose, it's fun. But like in Switzerland, improv also has rules that are compulsory, right? So, and it's not just free swimming, but we have a series of rules. And the first rule is to say yes and. And when you think about it in the theater component, it's if someone gives you an offer, i.e. they come to you on stage and say, oh, here we are at a bakery, you say yes, and you agree. Yes, and the bakery's on fire. And then we have a seat, right? So just to say, yes, we have a bakery, it's the yes and which makes it actually that little extra bit more, or we've added something, we've co-created something. So that's how we use it as a tool in improv theater or improv comedy. And in the world of work, if you think about how many meetings have you been in where you hear, yes, that's, Mike, this is a great idea, but we have no budget. And Artin, yes, it's a great idea to go for a walk, have a walking meeting, but it's raining. So, how many times do you hear this yes, but it kills the energy, it kills this idea of co-creation. And when you even just flip the switch and say, okay, time box it for the next 20 minutes, the word yes, but is eradicated from everyone's language. And for the next 20 minutes, we will only say yes, and. So I actually did this as a kind of experiment in the job that I had in pharma. I actually, for 3 months, said, what would it be like if I only said yes, and I never, ever said yes, but. And it was really crazy because it became this kind of infectious agent. I watched people around me saying yes, and. And it wasn't just me doing it. Everyone else started to do it. And I realized that the energy was shifting. And I saw more and more creativity, more collaboration. I think conflict was diffused quicker. But it's really funny when you see, when you're in an international environment and you see like the Russian colleague, the Russian executive, yes, and, you just It's working.
I mean, that right there is culture. Yeah, you were changing culture.
Exactly, shifting the culture.
Yeah. Before we get into VivaValet, I have a just question about more, past life of yours. During COVID, a lot of people started hearing about the World Health Organization. I'm so curious to learn about your experience with that organization. I mean, what was it like, and what were you doing there?
So happy to talk about it. I'm so lucky. I'm so blessed in my life that I think I was in the right place at the right time with the right ability to really roll up my sleeves and work as hard as I possibly could. And so all those things coming together allowed me to land some interesting roles with those organizations. So I worked for WHO in Washington, D.C., or the Pan American Health Organization. I also worked for the World Bank in Washington, D.C., and then I was moved to Europe, where I worked for the World Health Organization. I did a lot of different things, and I was stationed in a lot of different countries, like in Bosnia, like in Armenia, in Georgia, and Azerbaijan. That's where we had this connection, right? So, I did things like trying in a period where we were quite ahead of our time, trying to create electronic patient records to reduce maternal mortality in Armenia and Georgia, for example, in the early 2000s. So it was actually quite interesting because in a place like that, where they're quite accustomed to taking data, but not to collecting a lot of data, but not necessarily using it as kind of, you look at it now as the AI/ML. They didn't really use the ML of it or using the analytics of it to actually redirect resources in healthcare systems to actually reduce maternal mortality. So we actually worked on that. And, foundational work for the ministries of health. I was embedded inside those ministries of health while I was working with WHO. I then moved back to Copenhagen, which is the European office of WHO, and I worked on comparative healthcare systems. So also in a time when, it's post-Soviet Union, many of these countries that were part of the Soviet Union had broken apart from the Soviet Union. They became independent, and they had a sort of a gap in capability of how to design their healthcare system independently. So I worked in a unit that was called the Healthcare Systems Unit, effectively, and we supported different governments to really understand, how would you set your budget? What are your targets that you want to achieve from a population health perspective? Therefore, how will you spend it? How will you monitor it? How do you actually prepare your workforce to deliver towards your public health goals of reducing mortality, reducing morbidity, illness, and funding specific diseases that were underrepresented in order to really shift the demographics. So, you may know that during that time, men started reducing their life expectancy. And so that was really a cause of urgency. So it was talking to those different ministerial departments that held money, held budgets around healthcare, that we could actually support them with that. So it was foundational. It was also during the time when some of these Eastern European countries were joining the European Union. So we worked with a lot of them to prepare for that process of joining the European Union and aligning their legislation in health with the rest of European Union legislation directives. So, it was really cool. So I bet you guys couldn't be talking about that tonight, right?
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, and you use the word foundational. I feel like it sounds like it was all foundational and all that. And VivaValet is kind of a culmination of all that work coming all together. So let's talk about that, your current venture. Can you tell us what it is?
So did you ever feel like you are sitting in a chair that was designed for you specifically, that the moment that you step into it was whole life has prepared you for this moment? And that's really what I feel like on the day in May, in May 2021, when my founder, Miriam Perina, called me and said, I have this idea and I think that I want to do this with you. And from that moment, she spoke about this vision that she had for serving elders in their home, or at the time, senior citizens, older people who are essentially 70 and above, which we'll get to the term elders in a little bit, because that's quite special. It's part of the DNA of our company. But really, how do we have speaking of demography, growing population, by 2040, we have 60 million of these people in the United States of that age group. We have a dependency ratio, specifically dependency ratio means people in the community or in a family who are available to care for someone who is an older person. So in 1980, roughly, that was around between 7 and 9 per every older person. By 2040, it's 2 to 3 people who are available to care for an older person. So we have this situation where we both saw that trend as a demographic trend. And also we felt it very personally because we have people that we were caring for ourselves and very concerned about, who we live a great distance away from, that we want to be able to offer care to. So it was this moment of, again, talking about WHO, talking about data, talking about demography, talking about major public health trends. This is a public health trend that we all have to be invested in because we will have to care for elders. We need to have an older, sort of government, private sector, older care strategy of how will we face this care burden in this care gap from a data, epidemiology, and from a public health perspective, and from a personal, family, emotional perspective, the toll that it takes on very often the adult daughters who are stuck caring for these people, these older people themselves, having to actually leave their place of work or having to be more flexible, maybe walking away from some opportunities in their own careers in order to actually care for their elders. There's a crisis that's growing. So we felt it both, at a meta level and a very micro level where we're actually wishing that we could be somewhere else, knowing that we want to send care to our elders, but we're far away. So that's the kind of the itch that we were trying to scratch, which is how do we do that? And now, there's never been a time before where the tech was available to help us do this. So if you think of the model of Expedia or Booking.com, if you were going to plan your vacation, you would because of those consolidator websites, you would never dream of looking at 10 different airlines or 20 different hotels on your own. You go to these consolidator websites and they actually spit out options. Oh, Mike, I think that you like this kind of, hotel, and Art, and I think this is the kind of routes that you're looking for, and this is your budget, and this is, what we have, the times that you're looking for. This is what we're trying to accomplish with VivaValet, which is be that kind of curating body and be that consolidator website for older care outside of medical care.
It's amazing. A couple of things that you had said there. What is it that's causing the decline, if you will, in support for elders?
Okay, so great question. What causes that decline is lower birth rates.
Okay.
So we have lower birth rates. So one of the great successes of reducing large family size is that we, if we say that larger family sizes are, by reducing family size, we increase wealth from a meta perspective. Congratulations, we've done that. So we have fewer live births that are coming in over the last 40 years in the U.S. And so we have that care gap, and that's a U.S. terminology, yet that's actually a global trend. And the only place where that's actually not happening is sub-Saharan Africa, where they're actually able to make replacement. So already the birth rate is so it's currently 2.1 per capita in terms of live births. And by 2030, it'll be 1.7 per capita. Already that we're almost not making total replacement of our population. So if you have fewer and fewer children in your society, you have the dependency ratio will go down and down and down.
Yeah, I actually just read an article about China, how they are facing a huge problem, and their experiment of one child per family seems to be backfiring, which they're concerned about a economic impact that will have to the entire country, which I found fascinating. So I quickly sent the article to Michael, and we were chatting about it. It's fascinating.
It's true because you have, the dependency ratio now, you've got more olders than you have youngers. And so how are you going to care? How are you going to get that care in the Chinese population? Also, when you speak of the lone wolves, i.e. the men who are not finding wives, because there was also a great deal of infanticide of women, of girls, especially in the countryside. So you've got this gap of women. Where are the women? Men are getting married. Birth rate is going down further. So it's really a huge care gap. Also, when you think of the aging population in Asia as well, or specifically in China.
Yeah. You've been very deliberate in using the word olders. So can you just touch about that word and how it kind of fits into your branding and how you talk about VivaValet?
100%. So I think it's important for me to say first that even though Miriam and I started this quite connected, very clear with our ambition of impact, and very clear of what we wanted to do to serve olders, we actually wanted to lean deeply into the problem. Instead of saying, yes, this is what we want to do, great, we're going to go start designing services and start designing tech and designing our website and all the booking systems, we actually took a breath and we stepped back and we actually invested 2 months in ethnography. And ethnography isn't, it's not like focus groups where you come and say, here's 10 questions, what do you think? Yes, no, A/B test. It's not that. It's actually prospective observational research where you put cameras in people's homes, you do video diaries, you do long, open question kinds of questionnaire, Q&A with your subjects. And we did it in 5 different cities inside the United States. So a huge investment for a startup to make. But what we were trying to do was get really curious and invest in the problem and invest in the challenges that olders were experiencing. And so one of the things that we encountered, there's so many things we can unpack from that experience because it absolutely shaped the way that we're going with what we designed and what we continue to design and continue to roll out. But one of the things that you mentioned, Arden, about olders was a question that we kept coming up with is, how do we call these people? Because one of the tenets of this company is reverence. And you spoke about Asia and specifically cultures that are up, in the blue zones where you have people who are living up to 90 and 90 years old and 100 years old. There's quite a success associated with lifespan and aging in a healthy way. And we also know in the United States, we often look at age as you become invisible. The 50-year-old, the 60-year-old you retire, you start to become invisible. And we know that these people don't want to be invisible. We know that they have purpose. We know that they have ambition still to really have something that they stand for. This very much comes out of our ethnography. So in that spirit of this is what they want to achieve, they still have runway left in their lives. They still have purpose to express and to create. And then as a result, how do we call them? Were they seniors? Are they the golden age people? Are they elders? Because in some populations, you call the elders in your society actually quite, those are the most senior, the most revered people in the population. But actually that word had really been overused. So we asked them, hey guys, what do we call you? And they said, one of them said, not dead yet. So
it's fair. I like to every day,
not
now.
Dead yet. Which of course we love. So not dead yet. But really they said, you can call us olders because we know we're older. Don't call us seniors because it seems a bit sort of overused. Call us olders. And so we've started to say olders and our olders because we cherish them. And also the way we speak about our olders is these are the life levels you've lived. It's a privilege. Think of all the people who are young. I had a dear friend who died on Monday who was 53. And you think about that life and, to be 70, to be 80, to be 90, to be 100, that is a gift. So how do we then look at those lives lived as a gift in this world? So you got to live those lives. It's not like, oh, you're invisible. You have so much life in you. You have so many experiences. You have so much to teach, and we have so much to learn from you. And we respect and revere who you are. So we call you our olders.
I love it. A couple things come to mind when you were saying some of that. The first one, maybe not the can of worms that we open about current media talking about current presidential candidates, or because in this situation,
we will swipe beneath them.
Exactly, weaponizing it almost. But you mentioned something about the blue zones that I'm just curious to understand a little bit more, because so when we talk about this and ultimately your company set up here in the U.S., and not to say there won't be applications elsewhere.
Based in Illinois now.
Yep. Okay, perfect. So, but the you having lived in Europe for a large chunk of your life now, and with reference to like blue zones and knowing that those are, there's a couple of them in Europe, I think near Greece, near Italy, another in Japan, another in Yorba Linda in Southern California, and another in Costa Rica. A big thing that they tie to their longevity is the way that the families care for each other there, or the community. Sometimes there is a religious component to it, but not always. Often it's more of a spiritual sort of component. Sometimes it's actually the way that they look at their relatives and pay honor and continue to their relatives. And I'm just curious, is in the US, we seem to be the culture that doesn't put as much emphasis on that. I'm not saying there aren't pockets. Again, we could talk about like Armenian community as I, go over here at Art, and it's like I would actually say I've admired how they seem to stay in this close-knit community. But I'm curious, like, in your thoughts in general, if what I'm saying is accurate, that the U.S. does seem to put less care on this. Is Europe better in general, or is it just those blue zone pockets that happen to have figured some of this out? What's your thoughts around that?
Excellent question. So it is interesting that when we speak of the blue zones, often we think of them as wistfully, oh, this is something that happens outside of the U.S. But again, we have a blue zone pocket in the U.S. So, what do these things have in common? They're all in different geographies, different temperatures, different altitudes, different climates. You could say that there's some thematic similarities in diet, in that they tend to have a rather whole food consumption. They tend to be rather physically active, in that they either have some type of organized physical activity, or they're actually physically working still into late age. And so there's some weight bearing activity, which allows them to maintain their bone and muscle structure. So I think all those are really very much contributors. However, the key thing is the social interactions. So I think that's one of the big gaps that we have in the United States, is that we are, by definition, from a political philosophy, we are libertarians. And libertarians say, I do my thing, I make my choice, I have freedom of choice, and I have the freedom of my consequences to my choice. Whereas, a lot of these other cultures tend to have a social egalitarian sense, where you have the common good and you're acting towards the common good. So I think that's one thing to really think about, right? So that you have the sense of shared community and the pride around intergenerational communities, the pride around intergenerational interactions, and the relevance of the elders still being injected into community with reverence, with inclusion, and they're for the benefit of everyone. So the benefit of the older who has the interaction, and therefore, has the ability to stay cognitively sharp as well longer. I think, some of the studies that we've seen from the OECD is the most unhealthy thing that you can ever do isn't necessarily smoking or drinking. It's actually retiring. The act of retirement is the tipping at the sort of that iceberg moment, like you're talking about, Mike, where, in the act of retiring, if you go to this idea of I'm no longer going to work, I'm going to stay home, I'm going to do my thing, I'm going to maybe play my golf or whatever, I'm withdrawn from social interactions, I'm withdrawn from a sense of purpose, I'm withdrawn from a sense of sort of self-determination. So again, the commonality in those blue zones is that you still have some type of purpose, whether that's being injected in the family, in the community, or some sense of work, or some sense of creative outlets, theater, art, etc., comedy, the late ages. We love it. Jazz hands, all of this. And then there's also some kind of physical aspect of it too, so that there's so finding ways to keep relevant and keep active and keep social. So that is a huge thing that we're concerned about, that we also want to bridge the gap on with our company. Because we know that very often the family structure in the US, as we are a libertarian society, we don't necessarily stay in the same communities where we were born in, but maybe our parents did. So you have a situation where maybe we become economic migrants, or become, migrants who move towards an opportunity, be it through education, be it through pursuit of work, or pursuit of family, etc. We move, and we have these dispersed families. And therefore, how do you maintain the psychological connection, the emotional connection to your elders when you're moving away? So that's actually one of the things that we hope to bridge the gap on, as an intergenerational connector between youngers, adult children, for example, and their elders. So finding a way to have shared calendars, finding a way to have feedback loops that share, hey, this is how mom's doing. I went, mom had a ride today with Viva Valet, and the driver was able to report back that something seemed a bit off in her behavior. Then we can notify with once they've given us the permission to do this, we can notify the adult child, and the adult child can actually call in and knows when to call in. Because we often know that when families will get together during holidays, for example, during, big family celebrations or holidays, it's often mom or dad or grandma and grandpa. They seem fine and they're very happy to have everyone around. But what you don't see is after you left, they kind of collapse a little bit, or they go to their physician and you have an Oscar-winning performance because they really want to demonstrate that they're fine and they're just doing great, 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 no problem. And then what they're missing is all of the daily slow elements of decline. And so what we're trying to also do as we deliver the services to support elders living at home independently, like the food delivery, the handyman, and the assisted rides, and the cleaning, and the in-home tech, and the pet care, all those kinds of things, we also have the added benefit of the call. If there's something going on, if there's something of concern, the adult child needs to know, we call, we alert them. We also have that social connection with them as well. We call our customers just to check in. And it's a beautiful thing because, again, I'm a citizen of the world, and I've had this great opportunity where I've worked with an insurance company in South Africa where I saw that they were using this as a tool where they just called their chronic patients once a month just to say, how are you doing? Not how is your diabetes or how's your blood pressure or blah, blah, blah. What are your numbers? Just how are you doing? Hey, the last time we talked, we know that your grandson had a football game. How was it? What's life doing? Just a call like this is for them to know that someone actually cares. They're part of a community. Someone cares enough to ask and to listen and to remember. People in that program in this health insurance company in South Africa lowered their costs in the healthcare system by 40%. And so this is also something we know that we're actually practicing public health at the very core foundational level, and that there's a psychological element, there's a hopefully an element where we're keeping people out of the hospital, we're keeping people independent and helping them feel well in their own self-determination.
It sounds so valuable. I mean, like you hear it, you're just like, how is this not something that's just a normal part of how we
Yeah,
operate
it's
now?
like
I look forward to
it's
it being,
like it should be table stakes. Like it sounds like.
yeah.
um, I have some just startup-y questions, but before that, I wanted to tell a little of my own personal story around my dad because everything you just said resonates so much. So he's retired, and it was that tipping point. It's like, oh my God, what do I do with my life? So I actually got him because of our kind of Michael's background in the entertainment industry. He's now an extra on big Hollywood movie sets. Loves it. I mean, he loves it, takes it seriously, and goes and that sense of community actually helps him not go crazy. So I can definitely vouch for what you said for with a real example.
Well, I think the real example, and also like, that's something that we've done with we do it clearly. Like we teach improv to our service providers, all the people that are doing our handyman work. We're teaching them all the yes and mindset as well, and working on all these improv tools. We have taught actual improv classes to caregivers who are, we're working with, we're alongside of them, and also to elders themselves. And it is really like watching Benjamin Button.
That's great.
That's amazing.
It's remarkable to see, just to walk into a room where they're rather skeptical, looking at each other, saying, I'm here to watch. And then like, well, this is actually a class. Like you're the show. It's not like I'm not going to do a show. We're going to do a class and we're going to do a little show together. And they're very dismissive. And by the end, you could hear the sound of chairs, pulling up, and everyone was being high-fiving each other. And I remember the director of this nursing home came to us and said, I haven't seen this level of interaction for these people ever. So it is just it's again, to bring the improv into it and to bring that sense of community, purpose, artistic expression, connection with others. It's really beautiful to watch, and Benjamin buttoning them.
Yeah. I love that term too. But it's almost like giving permission because, as humans, whatever, as we go through our lives, there is this thing, from school all the way up to even your jobs and stuff like that, where people do fall into this sort of I don't want to say raise your hand, this sort of thing, but there is this permission thing that can happen along the way. So I really like where you're going with improv, because improv is reminding yourself again that, everything isn't just a but and it ends there once somebody says that. It's okay, how do you then build on that? So I think that just has incredible ramifications I wouldn't have really thought about. And then especially now, as it does come to, I won't call it rewriting some of our psychology, but I do think people could benefit from this even earlier in their lives, so that they are more open as they get older and aren't accepting what, I don't know, the society as a whole might suggest it should look like, just because that's how others have lived it or have approached it. And instead you can have that yes and mentality. So anyway, I think that's so powerful.
Going back to the early days of VivaValet, I think what me and probably listeners are interesting to learn about is, how did you fund this company? Was it self-funded? Did you raise some funding? And what was that process like? Because when you don't have easy access to capital, sometimes it's hard to get that idea off the ground. And all of a sudden, your entire focus becomes a pitch deck and finding the right investor. So what was that process like for you guys to get this off the ground?
As you're asking me this question, I'm feeling all of that, which is everything's on fire. What do you put the water on first? Right? Because you're literally fighting for your life on a daily basis. So, from a funding perspective, we're very fortunate to be self-funded currently. And that is through a combination of, investor capital, time, angel, etc. So we have not gone through a Series A. We've actually been in early discussions with that now. And it's really interesting to see how the funders and VCs are actually very curious about this model. I think they see the potential because of the growing market, because of where we are already. And I think very often, I think to your point, Arden, very often as a startup, you come with the idea and then you seek the capital to actually make the minimum viable product and the wireframe of all this and then put it together and to test. Whereas we launched, we did our ethnography, we did our full UI UX, we did our full branding, brand personality mapping, brand strategy, all of this first, because I think that we made really smart decisions early to go investigate the problem before we tried to solve it, because we knew if we were designing something first, we probably would have designed the wrong thing. We know we would have designed the wrong thing. So we investigated, getting really, really curious about the problem, about the constraints, the hopes, the fears, the concerns, that our community is suffering from, both olders and their adult children. And then from there, we went into the design process. So our ambition is to to continue to be self-funded through our business operations before we seek the next round of capital. Not to say that we won't, but to say that our ambition is to be self-funded within the next 4 months. So it's going very, very well and very fast.
That's great. I mean, that's a perfect example of the right way to do it. Because I hear a lot of stories of aspiring entrepreneurs having an idea, not really validating it, and then very quickly trying to just raise money for it. And it's like, well, the investor is not just putting money into the idea, the investor is investing in you too. So if you haven't shown that ability to execute, it's just tough for somebody to write a check. So for you guys, you've shown you can execute and you have a product and a business that's actually driving revenue. So it's like, yep, you've done it. So raising funds, as much as you can delay it, even better. But at some point, whenever you need to, it's going to be much easier than if you try it in the beginning. You talk about design. I'm very curious. So, given your users base and customers, how did you go about UX and UI, knowing that this is an older population and maybe not tech savvy?
It's almost an emotional response I have to this question, because it is part of the act of devotion we have to our elders, that the process that we went through. So again, starting with the ethnography, we had people that we were working with, as well as our own relatives and friends and friend, parents. We gathered our original ethnography participants and all of anyone else who would listen to us, basically. So thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dad.
Love you, Dad. Thank you. And your partner. Thank you, your girlfriend. Very helpful. We brought them into our UI UX process. So on this point, when you say, oh, tech for olders, olders are, it's impossible for them to use tech. They're not tech savvy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what we discovered also through the ethnography is that they are so eager to learn. So maybe the analogy, Mike, since we sat next to each other when we were in fifth grade, maybe we had, since we sat next to each other, maybe we had an exceptional history teacher and we both loved history, and we had a terrible math teacher in fifth grade, and we hated math, but in sixth grade we had the best math teacher ever, and it made us love math. It's not that the student isn't capable of learning, but when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and when you have the right teacher, actually the student can actually move mountains. And so this is what we've been learning, because we offer tech classes in the community, and it's not that no one has taken the time to teach them about how it works. So things like, let's make a Spotify playlist for you. What's that? Imagine, like, let's download some apps. Let's have a whole class on Google Maps if you want to learn how to navigate from here to there. So things like, oh, I want to share files with my grandchildren. I want to share, they want to send me music, or I want to send them a video, or I want to send them a picture. Those are often the usability questions. So it's really understanding, again, what is the user trying to do? What is the problem that they have? What are they trying to solve for? And I think so often that this gap between age and tech is that who are your designers? Your designers are often the 20-something, often male, perhaps more monolithic in the ethnicity that's represented. Okay, a bunch of white dudes in San Francisco.
I'm just saying, okay, yeah.
And even we see that with ourselves and our design. So as much as ambition as we have is to always be inclusive, we have to keep teaching and reteaching our designers. So I just had a new designer arrive, a new programmer come, and I was just saying, do you have an older person in your life? And they said, yeah, my mom. My mom's 45, and I was like, oh God, like, that is so old. So when your designers say an old person is in their early 40s or mid 40s, then we have a problem when we're trying to reach those who are in the upper age limit. So I think that's the real transition is, if you're going to design for olders, you're going to design for anyone, do you have them represented in your room? Are they at the table? So we had them at the table. So we would do the sprints. We would start the sprints with the videos from the ethnography. We would do the sprint. We'd come up with some kind of wireframe concept. We would test it with them in the end of the day. So they were constantly going back and forth saying, this works, this doesn't work, this works, this doesn't work. So they were deeply involved in all of the UI UX of the site, of the website, of now the mobile app that we're about to release, as well as any other kind of tools that we're in the process of developing, which is very fun.
That's exciting. Something that comes to mind there when you say that, just my days at Netflix, and I think it applies to any of these streamers now too. As everybody went to streaming, and there's still a lot of people who stay on cable. Well, the way that some individuals are used to watching TV, and often it does fall with older, is because they are used to a certain style of guide and everything there. So there's been these conversations about how you now have to look at, do you develop an app that's actually more optimized for that, because that's what's used to, versus trying to keep, saying this is what it looks like now, you have to use it. But when you do that, then people aren't necessarily going to adopt it. But
so to your point, Mike, exactly. Even if you look at the way that people hold their phones. So how, you and I may text like this, right? Like we might be holding our phone like this and texting with our thumbs. Whereas an older will often hold it like this and do like this. So already we know that they're going to navigate it differently. As you age, your color acuity changes. So, the tendency towards color blindness comes on. Therefore, the contrast, the contrast between colors will become more and more faint. Obviously, size is an issue, but you have to make them larger, but also you have to eliminate choice. So on our own website, inside of it, we have something called Easy Mode, which was designed with the olders to say, what's this most stripped down, most kind of neurologically obvious pathway to navigate a site? with, again, yes, larger icons, but also like more intuitive, more simple, less choice, less buzzing, like none of these spinning wheels and none of these extra bouncing things. Those are distractions. Keep it really simple. And that's actually cleaner and easier for them to navigate. And quite honestly, it's empowering because then they can do stuff. They can order their rides on them by themselves. They can order the food to be delivered by themselves. And it's actually quite awesome. One of the things that and we talked about indicators of success, for example, in the company. The first thing we said is, when will we know that we're doing the right thing? Like we validated all these things with research, but when we actually put it in the market, how do we know we're doing the right thing? And it is the moment where we hear from an older, I don't know what I would do without you. I don't know how I could have done, I don't know how I could have gotten to and from my eye surgery without VivaValet. We've heard that now many times. It's
Amazing.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it sounds like the promise of this, service, can take you to the idea of like, now we can't imagine our lives without our phones, for example. We can't imagine our lives without email and work. Imagine having to send faxes, to people. Or for that matter, for some people, even things like Uber and other stuff, like that's their way of getting around. So I absolutely can see how this can become that. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I love it.
And I think that the most essential thing in all this, which I don't even think I've said is critical, that can't be forgotten, is the most important element of all this is trust. So any service that you would send to an aging relative or loved one, and any service is going to be welcomed into the home of an older, must be trustworthy. So trustworthy is, no fraud, no not taking advantage of them, no abuse, no, for us it's all of those things, plus no tipping, no cash interaction at all, ever. And if any of our service providers accept a cash tip, they're taken off of our service immediately. So we're trying our very best to maintain trust in every possible way and keep it documented all along the way, through our vetting, through our training, etc.
Yeah, no, as you mentioned that, and I mean, just the importance, and I think that's going to be one of the most interesting things as you scale is going to be that training and making sure. And I like already the way that you guys are thinking about, how you're approaching that, but that will be, the most challenging aspect, I think. I mean, I say that there's going to be lots of challenging aspects you're already facing, but, that's going to be one of them because it's so hard in general. You look at some companies out there who do a fabulous job of that. Zappos comes to mind of their customer service side, but they're not, these people aren't coming into your home or otherwise. And then at the same time, you think about, again, Chick-fil-A comes to mind for me when you're in there and the way that, these individuals interact with you. And I think what's promising there is these are often younger individuals who you could go to McDonald's, have similar, age group, but there's a clear difference between the training that they get, training and hiring that happens at one versus other. So but I think that's super exciting because I think it allows you to really just set the standard in the industry. So
I think part of that is the people who are delivering our services are not actually inside of our company. For example, we don't have crews of cleaning companies. We don't have our own fleet. We manage a fleet, but we're actually our ethos is, again, it's this win-win-win concept of win for the olders, win for the others, youngers. But the businesses that we're working with are actually local companies, and we're seeking out, the leaders of mom and pop kind of run companies in these local communities, because we don't want to take business away from any of them. Rather, what we're doing is, we know that they're respected. We know that we go through, their bonded. We do the criminal background checks. We do the extra training. They're willing to take on this extra aspect. We're not charging affiliate fees. And so they want to work with us because we're doing the investment in marketing, and we're actually sending the customers to them. We're enhancing their service, and then they're actually able to stay solvent as well. Whereas some of the big mega companies are coming and pushing them out. We're actually keeping a home for small businesses in these communities.
I think that's fantastic. How are you scaling any of that training now that you do? Because honestly, in some ways, it can be even harder when the company is external to yours, even though they are motivated, obviously, by the business and hopefully the shared mission. But how are you approaching that?
So it's a really great, exciting element because we do the training both virtually, face to face, but we're now doing more and more kind of online coursework. I'm actually doing the training, but again, we're able to scale me by doing, pre-recorded things. We have pre-recorded training. We have then online exams that they have to take, and then we schedule these check-ins with all of the service providers, and it's really fun to see because they want to talk to each other about their experiences and how to coach each other. But it's basically like once a week improv, honestly. Let's call it what it is. It's coming together to do some improv exercises and to share what are your wins with your olders. So, and our big ambition is to keep scaling the improv as well for more caregivers. So one of the ambitions is when you think about caregivers who are professionals, they have certifications, for example. But our next step is really how do we support the others, like the caregivers who are kids of the olders? How do we support them because they're not actually getting any training? So this is one of the things that we're hoping to actually scale as being a tech. This is the benefit of being a tech company. We find a way to scale on that platform.
That's fantastic. I mean, two of those in their own right. I mean, that piece you just described is a business in its own, because so many people struggle at that. If, I know obviously you're focused on the core mission here, but it's like, I could just see, it's like, reminds me of Disney has something with their, I forget if they call it Disney Leadership Program, I think now, which they scale off and they do for other businesses now, just because Disney was renowned for how they did that within their, resorts, parks, customer service. And now it's literally this other program that they do in general. So anyway, those things come to mind when you're saying this. But
Jennifer, I mean, you guys, you and your co-founder took so much time in the validation idea, pulling in potential customers into the process, and it could slightly go against like the Silicon Valley mentality of move fast and fail fast, that thing. So how long did you guys actually take to go from, hey, we're going to do this, to launching of an MVP?
So we launched the MVP in September. We commercially launched in September of 2023. And from the first concept, the first meeting, it was May of 2021. So we took our time and we took our time with, as I said, I think as two founders, it took us some time to kind of noodle on it. Like, I think when you're coming up with an idea, sometimes you need the time to talk and meet, and you have coffee and these kind of things, and you work through it. And then we decided to do this investment in the research, and then from there we started building. And I think when it comes to fail fast, it never felt like we were doing anything slow, because there's a lot of MVPs that we built along the way that we had to rip up and tear away. Anyway, we built a whole website. We expected to launch in 2022. We built a whole website, and the whole thing just had to be scrapped, which was an expensive mistake. And I wouldn't say it was a mistake, but it was an expensive experiment. But I'm glad that we did because we now have something that actually works in the way that we want it to. But I think this is the way it goes. Is sometimes it's 2 steps forward, sometimes it's 5 steps back, and then a leap of 15 forward. And I think it's felt like that consistently for us.
And were you guys from day one of idea inception full-time dedicated to this, or were you still kind of held executive roles?
In the first year, I was full time on it, Mary, and so was Miriam. And the second year, I actually took a side gig, so I was also doing some consulting on the side. Um, and then we're both 100% full time now for a year.
That's great. Um, to kind of start to wrap up this amazing conversation, I'm sure there's so many challenges you guys faced. It's just goes by what you do. What are those challenges? And like for other inspiring entrepreneurs, like what are the insights and tips you have for them to kind of maybe face those challenges but recover faster, or just not face them at all?
Yeah. I think, Arton, you had said earlier something along the lines of this balance between operations, running the business, growing the business, and fundraising, like, sort of this triangle. Um, I think, especially when you are designing a tech company from the ground up or any venture from the ground up, this idea of you're building a culture every day. So your leadership shadow is very visible. So how do you keep your shit together when things are literally going off the rails? So I think that's one thing, is always remember to people are watching you always. So always find a way to breathe, find your center, etc. Um, and I think if you're going to start something, you need to love that idea. You need to love it so much, and you need to believe in so much in the purpose. So for example, Peter Diamandis, Salim Ismail, these leaders who came up with the exponential business framework, we used a lot of those tools in the very beginning. We're so fortunate. So the massively transformative purpose for us is really important. Transform aging for us is transform aging experience. That is our massively transformative that's our massively transformative purpose. So to keep that in our mind as our North Star every single day, and saying every little thing that we're doing is one step towards transforming the aging process for a family that we're serving, reducing intergenerational stress. Every single thing we do is a step towards that purpose, and reminding ourselves as founders and reminding our entire company, because sometimes the rigor of the daily business is really rough, right? These days are long from, the days are long and they run into each other, and you got to keep going, and you have to keep reminding yourself and your staff of all the purpose that you're delivering, because as an entrepreneur, you got to do everything. You're scrubbing the toilets, you're recording copy, you're going through, you're looking at code, you're doing absolutely everything, and you have to remember to breathe and keep the purpose going. So we always start we have like our Silver Hearts Awards, where we keep reminding people and rewarding them for living the values of our company, and even in our very early days. But what is our culture? What are our values? Our values of family, reliability, of being straightforward, of being upfront, being fun, a little irreverent, all of these things. We're constantly rewarding our staff for living those values on a daily basis.
A quick question on that too. For you, would you see yourself having pursued this? I mean, obviously, I understand that your founder came with the idea concept that you guys have then built together. But would have you actually, you think, pursued something like this on your own? Or do you think having a partner has made it even more likely or fruitful with the two of you working together?
I think we would not, the challenges that we've had, we would not have been able to design this alone. And I'm so grateful that we had each other as partners, sort of inspirational partners, business partners. We're friends as well. I'm really fortunate our friendship has deepened into a really rich, beautiful friendship. And also would say the sense of accountability. So we keep each other accountable for all of this. And I don't think it would exist if it weren't for the two of us together. I think, so as I said at the beginning of this conversation, I think there's a moment when you realize I've stepped into a place in my life that was designed for me. Everything I've done up until now and everything she did up until now was for this moment. And how lucky are we? We get to do this. It's so exciting.
It's great. This has been fantastic just to learn about your background and your venture. Where could people find you if they're trying to
find us at www.vivavalet.com. You can find us on social media, also VivaValet on Facebook. We have a Facebook group. We've got Instagram, TikTok. We're on LinkedIn as well, where you can see on our website and on our LinkedIn page, you can see some of our thought leadership pieces, some of our research. We have a YouTube channel as well. So if you look at VivaValet as a YouTube channel, I'm the host. We bring on people onto our show who are elders, who are gerontologists, people who are actually designing HR benefit plans for youngers that could potentially incorporate something like this as a benefit for HR teams as well, insurance adjusters. And so we even had like mothers and daughters come on, which has been pretty fun to hear the stories of what would you tell your younger self, and therefore tell your daughter? So it's this kind of beautiful exchange of
stories.
I love it, especially kind of what comes to mind when you think about some of those things is once we become parents, that's where all of a sudden we realize, oh my gosh, look at everything our parents did for us. And I'm sure there's some similar thing. It's like appreciation that comes, and there's probably something similar as we get older and when our kids do move out. And now we realize this different chapter that sometimes you don't get that because you don't hear enough of those stories and experiences. So it sounds like, just in general, what you might be exposing out there to people is pretty incredible. And you said one more thing in one of the messages I found that I really liked. And I think it's also a nice way to kind of wrap this up a little bit, but I think you referred to aging as a team sport. Does that sound right? Or does it sound like, I love that.
Aging is a team sport. Who's on your team? Who's on your back bench? Better make sure you have a very full bench behind you.
Right.
Right.
That's such an amazing way to think about it that I never would have before. So
That's wonderful. Well, again, thank you for joining us today. Please, for everybody watching and listening, comment, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.